Hey, what's up, PUF? You guys know who it is. And since we have a lot to go over today, we have a small recap and a quick revision from last time. When we last left off, Goku and Vegeta, along with the Witch Saiyans, Yamcha, and Krillin, went to train with Whis. Meanwhile, Frieza is revived as in canon and takes on 2 training partners for 4 months instead of 1, making him much stronger than in canon. After battling those left on Earth, he has both defeated Son Gohan and Tien upon the Saiyans' arrival. There was also a poll given to decide who would battle Frieza, and Krillin had won that poll. And just before we get right back to the story, I do have one small revision. Frieza's death is not completely assured here. This was partly a bit of deception to keep this part a bit less predictable, and partly my neglect to think out the full ramifications of 2 training partners instead of 1. We'll get into this more later, but for now, we return to this story. Frieza currently wore one of the most satisfied and elated smirks on his face that he had ever had, as he watched horror and rage cross each of the faces of Goku and his companions, though Goku's was easily the most enjoyable. So much so that Frieza couldn't help but to further the taunting. He let his tail curl down and around the neck of Gohan's burnt and bloody corpse, holding it up for all to see, as well as making a snide comment about breaking his fragile little toy. Out of anger, Goku immediately made to move towards Frieza to get revenge, but to his surprise, Krillin's arm pushed out in front of him to keep him back. The shorter human turned Saiyan cuts his eyes up and back to Goku and gives him a stern, yet somewhat compassionate look. It was very obvious that Krillin was angry too, but he states that he's sure Goku could feel Frieza's power, and can tell there's a lot more hidden under the surface. If he's too careless because he's angry, he can make a huge mistake, and that could cost everyone something. Not to mention, Gohan had never died while Piccolo had, so at the very least Gohan could be wished back, while getting Piccolo back would be a bit trickier. But Frieza had to be dealt with first. Hoping to get a smile out of Goku at this line of logic, Krillin nudges him and says that he was the one to win rock paper scissors for taking Frieza on first, and Master Whis did say that he was the closest to completing their training. Getting serious, he reminds everyone of the plan. They need to split up. One of them need to get the kids home, and one of them need to get their fallen and take them somewhere safe to make their wish. While one of them took on Frieza, this did little to placate Goku, but before he could respond, Frieza's impatience at being ignored by 2 people boiled over, and he fired a small blast towards the 2. Thankfully, Yamcha, the only person still watching Frieza outside of Vegeta, who was still holding the nearly dead Tien, was the one to react and protect everyone. Appearing in front of the blast, he makes a hammer out of his hands and bats it away towards their left with his left hand, all at the cost of a decently sized burn mark left on him. Shaking it to get the stinging to go away while maintaining his glare to shock Frieza, he decides he'll handle the kids if either Goku or Vegeta handle the Dragon Balls in getting their dead off the battlefield. With little more, he flies directly over to Android 18, who now still with Buri, who is helping the injured Trunks to remain in the air, with Marin and Kurizo at her side, the latter of which was attempting to comfort a shaking Goten as he stared at his brother's unmoving body. A little further back were Bulma and Jaco as they viewed the battle after having gotten the message out to Beerus' planet. Because of this, both Beerus and Whis would arrive a bit later than Goku and the Saiyans had, and they'd still have virtually the exact same interaction with the nervous Frieza. But unlike in canon, both deities are interested in seeing the fruit of the Saiyans' training, but are both impressed at Frieza's power increase. They assure the former Emperor that they will not be interfering in the battle, and he's able to regain his cool facade. Yamcha and 18 began shooing everyone away from the now cloudy sky-covered mountain range, but Goten broke away, declaring he wanted to stay. Hearing this, Goku, who is currently watching as Krillin flew down towards Frieza, who seemed unamused by this, didn't even turn his head, but spoke clearly enough to tell Goten to listen to Yamcha and leave with everyone else. Blatantly ignoring his dad, Goten continues to approach, but already in a foul mood, Goku turns his head and snaps at him in a commanding tone, demanding he get the hell out of here and mind his father. But the boy is unlike his brother and was nowhere near as meek and snapped back that he didn't have to listen to Goku. Goku is shocked, but now his move is made even worse as Goten stubbornly stays by his side to watch the battle. He sighs and tells 18 and Yamcha that they can leave Goten with him. And with that, they make their way towards West City with the children and Bulma. Realizing he would not be getting a shot at Frieza first, Vegeta growls and decides to get Tien to the lookout as quickly as possible, and also take Gohan's body there as well and get to collecting the Dragon Balls so that he could quickly return and watch the fight, and hopefully participate in it. Not to mention, he did want to save Tien's life. He bursts into the Super Saiyan state and zooms off in the direction of the lookout. The transformation was something that Frieza noticed but didn't dwell on, as this left Krillin and Frieza alone outside the 2 remaining Son family members. During Goten and Goku's little spat, Frieza had taken the time to ask Krillin what he thought he could do against him. He'd actually gotten a bit more angry when the former human smirked and pointed at Frieza. He declares that he is nothing like the man he'd killed on Namek, and he'd get revenge for himself and every life he'd taken today. In a rare showing of uncouthness, Frieza snorts and rolls his eyes at the cliche statement. He responds that he's played with enough trash for the day, and the only person he has any interest in fighting would be Goku. But before he can finish saying Goku, the image of Krillin in front of him flickers and his brow raises in confusion before he feels a kick land in his back and sends him sprawling forward on the ground. Snarling, he looks up to see Krillin's afterimage had dissipated, and looks behind him to see Krillin's left foot still extended in a perfect form for the kick. He then retracted it back and breathed out evenly, declaring that that one was for Gohan. For a split second, his cool persona cracks as his balance falters and nearly falls onto his butt, only to catch himself at the last minute and sweat drop as he puts both feet to the ground. Frieza springs back to his feet and shoots his fist out for a wide and obvious punch, which Krillin attempts to dodge, once again attempting to move without thought lesson that Whis had been drilling into him lately. But as he is actively thinking about doing it, there is still that fraction of a second where his body has to catch up to his thoughts. Because of this, he's a second too late to realize that the sloppy punch was a feint, only masking Frieza's jab with his tail under the bald man's chin, which was powerful enough to launch him into the air, shocking Frieza that he didn't just take his head right off then and there, and shocking Krillin at the underhanded yet pretty brilliant move. Getting over his shock, Frieza makes a grab for Krillin's ankle to slam him back into the ground, but the Shenron made Saiyan clenches his jaw and gets to thinking quick, which was always his ultimate weapon. In this position, he finally had the chance to try something he hadn't thought of before seeing Goku do it in the 23rd Martial Arts Tournament. Charging ki in the soles of his feet, he stamps out and flies back and nails Frieza directly in the chest with 2 small ki blasts, making the Emperor skid back as the extra force allows Krillin to flip and regain his stance on the ground. As Frieza wiped at the small burn/scuff marks, Krillin growled that that was for Piccolo. Whis lets out a small noise of being impressed and of notation, and when asked why by Beerus, the angel reveals Krillin's still thinking before moving. But he was glad to see that that amazingly tactical mind of his was definitely getting faster now that they had trained together. Partly a joke and partly a jab to motivate his lord, he jokes to Beerus that once he masters movement without thought, Krillin's fighting style would be too unpredictable to be countered, by God and mortal alike. Goten stared in awe of Krillin's skill as they watched Krillin flip back to his feet and Frieza stand wiping the dust from his sleek frame with a vicious snarl. He couldn't sense ki, but based on the measly sting every attack from Krillin carried, he was still a god compared to the little piss ants. Wiping his nose in a haughty fashion, he compliments Krillin, but states that he still views him as even lower than a stupid monkey. He isn't about to waste his time on something so insignificant. Yelling to Goku, who stood so far behind him, his anger is on full display now, as he orders him to face him. This actually causes Goten, still emotional from the death of his brother, to flinch. Goku showed no visible emotion though, clearly attempting to keep himself calm and not interfere in Krillin's battle. After all, his friend had to do the same for him many times before. Not hearing a peep out of Goku, Frieza's anger again begins to build, and he reaches out a hand towards the trash that opposed him. Soon, Krillin would feel sick to his stomach, as a terrifyingly similar sensation of floating without the use of his ki returned. He was lifted up into the air as Frieza's scowl became a sadistic grin, and he glowed to Goku that this felt just like old times. He squeezed his hand tight, and Krillin fearfully screamed as the explosion went off, and all that was left was a cloud of ash and soot as silence ruled. It was then dethroned by the sound of ki flaring and flowing hot and full of life. A familiar yellow glow surrounded Krillin, but with blue arcs of electricity. It seemed like Super Saiyan, but something was much more ferocious about it. Of course, this was the least shocking thing to Frieza, as Krillin's eyebrows and the dots that adorned his forehead began to shine a bright yellow. No notable damage was on his body, except for his clothing being burned and tattered, leaving his chest adorned and the remnants of his blue shirt under his gi. His fearful screaming turned to boisterous laughter, as Frieza's jaw dropped as he incredulously asked how Krillin could possibly be a Saiyan. The former human reiterates that he is not the same as he once was. But kudos to Frieza for making him abandon his base form, even going all the way up to Super Saiyan 2. Luckily, his power increased from training so hard it made the form available to him, and without it, he believed that Frieza would have gotten his way. While he hated him, the martial artist in him could respect the improvement Frieza had made. Krillin's Saiyan biology and the effect it had on his mind as well had made this thought impossible to keep in. Without another word, he rushes forward to gut check the Emperor, but his punches actually stop short of hitting his mark, as it's stopped by Frieza. But the force does cause him to go skidding backwards towards the edge of the cliff face over the water. After being humiliated by Krillin twice now, anger and rage filled the former Emperor of the Universe, as his grip began to tighten around Krillin's arm. Whether Krillin had always been a Saiyan and he just didn't know it, or if the Dragon Balls which had revived him had somehow been involved, he did not know, and at this point he did not care. This also explained how that random was able to deflect one of his blasts. He also thinks back to Sorbet's report that an unknown Saiyan had aided Vegeta in destroying Majin Buu. And on top of that, these Saiyans had been referencing people as their children, meaning the Saiyans were repopulating and he had done a terrible job of exterminating their race. The thought that the number of monkeys acting in opposition of him going up made something inside him snap. Without any fanfare, Frieza's power bursts and explodes, changing his aura from the usual malevolent purple to a deep royal gold. Remember, in this timeline, Frieza not only trained with Tagoma, but also with Sasami, causing his power to grow theoretically twice as much as what it was in canon. The depths of Frieza's potential cannot be understated, and with this said, I believe that Frieza would also attain on much greater ease a transform into his golden state. As such, with a bright flash, Krillin is nearly blinded, and he has a realization of Frieza's new appearance as the Emperor's grip tightens enough that something in his arm had also snapped. Goku and Goten were shaken to the core, while Beerus and Whis were intrigued. Frieza lifts his free hand and swings it in a chop to take Krillin's head off. Just before the blow could land though, Krillin's aura had also changed, and much like Frieza had before him, he unveiled the epitome of Super Saiyan by changing to the newly discovered Super Saiyan Blue as quickly as possible, and also like Frieza, with very little fanfare. Similarly to Frieza, Krillin has been training with 3 other gods. I believe under these conditions, Goku, Krillin, Vegeta, and Yamcha would all find it a lot easier to transform into Blue than Goku and Vegeta at this time in canon. Another part of the scaling that has to be interpreted here is that none of the Saiyans have similar potential as Frieza. While yes, they did have very strong training partners, they were not constantly training as Frieza was. We know they did a lot of chores for Whis, they had to sleep, they had to eat, and do other bodily functions that just take away from overall training time. Not to mention they're also not just abusing Zenkais, so the power they're going to gain is going to be very incredible, but compared to this version of Frieza, that's relative. With the godly blue form assumed, the split second before the attack landed was well spent, as Frieza's hand would leave a bruise, but it was far from taking Krillin's head off. Shockingly, Krillin could very easily tell that he still had not surpassed Frieza, but the gap had been close enough for him to win if he played smart. Krillin rears back and rams his forward into Frieza's chin, sending him back staggering, eyes wide, at Krillin's change and is still living. Though he attempted to hide it, Frieza was much too angry for more pleasantries. Instead, he and Krillin began engaging in much more ferocious combat, with their power shaking much more than just the earth as the mountainside crumbled and fell into the water. Goku was sweating as he felt the depths of Frieza's power. He wasn't sure that any of the Saiyans could take Frieza down alone, but there was something peculiar about the increase that he noticed, and he hoped that Krillin had as well. Goten, on the other hand, was much less assured of himself, and began to really cheer Krillin on to win this fight and avenge his brother. Feeling the massive spike in Frieza's ki and a large source of God ki, Vegeta dumps the duty of finding the rest of the Dragon Balls and gathering the rest of Tien's students onto Mr. Popo and Dende's hands, and rushes back to see what the hell was going on and what Frieza had been hiding. He arrives and is shocked by Frieza's transformation as Goku fills him in, and his brow furrows as he somewhat hopes that Krillin loses it so he gets a chance of revenge. Meanwhile, Yamcha decides it'd be best to stay back just in case he became the last line of defense. He was able to truly sense Frieza's power, and it scared him, but he was more than ready to step up when the time came. This also gave him a chance to spend a bit more time with his newborn son, whom is still to be named outside the story, mind you. Remember, I theorized that after becoming a Saiyan, Yamcha would become a real family man and be very protective over his family. Back at the battle, close combat was beginning to weigh heavily on Krillin due to his injured arm. Frieza was relentless in his flurries of punches and kicks, so blocking with that arm made them extra painful. Getting an idea, he weaves to his left, meaning he could only block with his injured arm. Frieza's subsequent haymaker would then miss by a large margin, but his tail was in perfect position to land a clean blow. That is until a bright yellow high-intensity disc of ki materialized over Krillin's injured arm, causing the tip of Frieza's tail to go flying off due to his own attack. The Golden Emperor screams in pain and jumps back, having forgotten about the technique. Switching roles, Krillin began to be the one much more aggressive in battle, using his injured arm and the Kienzan hovering over it like a razor-sharp shield that Frieza had to dodge and weave around instead. He jumps straight up to make some distance between him and the Saiyan and forms his own Death Saucer techniques above his hands. Throwing them both down at Krillin, the former human's eyes widen as he shields himself, allowing the purple version of his attack to slam into his and actually bounce right off of it. Expecting this, Frieza's hands then clapped and the saucers changed direction completely, coming in for a pincer attack on Krillin. Like this, he can block from both sides, and maintaining such a powerful attack for so long was draining, and so Krillin allowed his shield to dissipate and began focusing on dodging and fleeing from Frieza's attack. Using the after image once again, he avoids being sliced in half, and does his best to stay alive as Frieza relentlessly kept up the pursuit, actually creating 2 more Death Saucers and sending them his way as well. The chase would go on for much longer than either Frieza or Krillin desired, but what Frieza didn't realize is that his ki was now draining even faster than before. Like on Namek, he once again sees his fleeing opponent is attempting to make the remote-controlled attack run into his caster, but this time he has a perfect counter for it. He himself flies towards Krillin, whose eyes were locked on the Death Saucers pursuing him. Shifting his eyes back to his front, he sees Frieza's foot flying towards his face, and both grew a look of shock as Frieza's foot went right through Krillin's head and body with way too little resistance, revealing this to be an after image clone. The Death Saucers continued to make a beeline for their master, but Frieza easily glared at them using his own telekinesis to stop them in midair. Just then, Krillin's true position is revealed to be right over Frieza, as he crashes down on him with both feet, driving him hard into the cliffside. This was the first of the Saiyan's attacks to do actual significant damage against Frieza, and knocked him for a loop. as dust spurred up around Frieza and he felt Krillin's boot still pinning his skull to the ground. Worst of all for Frieza, his golden form had drained him too quickly, and this in tandem with his excessive use of the Ki Heavy Death Sausage technique had reverted him back to his base form. Though Krillin, on the other hand, panting hard from all his dodging and maneuvering, was able to maintain his blue form. In fact, he lifted a hand and created a final Kienzan to loom menacingly over Frieza's head like a dethroned emperor about to be cut down by his own guillotine. He admonishes that Frieza was far too inefficient with his ki usage, and that his new form was useless if he couldn't feed it. It took him a while to notice it, but once he did, he knew he could win. Speaking of which, with Frieza being so drained, and with him having a good amount of gas left in the tank, it was now safe to revert to his normal state. This final blow will be for the innocent people in the city Frieza destroyed, as well as Tien's students. As despair and surprisingly, fear settles in the pit of Frieza's stomach, he thinks quick and screams out to Krillin to please wait and allow him to atone for his evil deeds in some way. He was trying to buy time to gather strength and prayed that Krillin shared Goku's soft heart. A bit surprisingly, Krillin actually hesitates, but Vegeta calls out that it's simply a ploy. Frieza has no sense of guilt or remorse. He all but orders Krillin to finish Frieza off now. Goku strangely stays quiet on this topic, but there was clearly conflict in his gaze as well. Frieza counters by claiming it was hypocritical to allow Vegeta such a chance, but not he. He'd served under him for years. Infuriated, Vegeta yells to Krillin that if he had any pride as a Saiyan or as a protector of the Earth, then he'd finish Frieza off. He'd taken far too many lives. Today was just another load of corpses on the mountain he'd left in hell. For a single moment, Krillin would consider mercy. At this point, he could actually understand what Goku had felt when he had asked him to spare Vegeta's life the first time the Saiyan had come to Earth. It was a waste. This was just instinct. Even Goku had spared Frieza before. But that led him to coming right back as a threat. He spent all that time in hell and hadn't changed at all. Moreover, Vegeta had a point. While he didn't exactly care about the Saiyan race, he was a part of it now, and innately, genocide inspires feelings of hate. Above all that which ran through his head, the thought of Frieza destroying the planet where his daughter and wife lived, or taking the life of Piccolo and Gohan, a young man he'd literally seen grow up and often acted as a mentor figure to, it was all unforgivable. Krillin's mind is made up, and he coldly denies Frieza's requests. But those precious moments of rest, and the single moment where the pressure pinning Frieza's skull to the ground was lessened, were taken full advantage of by Frieza. He thrust both hands to the ground to throw Krillin off balance and get into a better stance for his next action. He's about to force a huge amount of his remaining ki into the earth to detonate it. In this state, it could possibly kill him, but he had a much better chance of living than any of the Saiyans did. Of course, this plan also hinges on Whis and Beerus's impartiality. But before he could even surge a minuscule amount of his ki, Vegeta, who had been watching closely, silently pointed and utilized his Gallic Beam or Cyclone shooting technique. The thin beam of ki rockets forward, impacting Frieza's left shoulder and running directly through it, knocking him back from the force. Meanwhile, Krillin's hand calls down the Kienzan at an odd angle after he'd almost regained balance, but the three acting in the same instant caused fate to twist, and instead of the Emperor being beheaded, only his left arm above the elbow and his legs at the hips were severed diagonally. Frieza screams in pure anguish, and summoning the last dregs of his ki, fires off two eye beams, one hitting Vegeta and the other Krillin. Both actually are pierced by the attack, but its low power makes it a shallow blow at most, only damaging due to surprise. But it was enough to knock them down and put them out for a second. Knowing retreat was his only way of living, this allows Frieza to pour absolutely everything he had left into flight, away from Earth and into space where he could survive. Goten, seeing the tables turn and being shocked by it and wanting to avenge Gohan, flashes into Super Saiyan and assumes the pose to charge the Total Destruction Wave. But he was not done. He calls out to his father that they must kill Frieza before he gets away completely. Goku, still pretty shocked and for a single instant, has a thought. And somewhat to his shame, it slows him. If I let him go, then he can get even stronger. And then I can fight him. Seeing his father stand still and knowing his power alone is insufficient, Goten yells out to his dad to please help. For Gohan! And that does it. That instantly forces Goku into a decision, and he charges the same blast as quickly as possible, at the cost of some of his power. But in perfect tandem and synchronicity, the two let off a father-son Kamehameha. The huge blue beam soars towards Frieza, who had just reached the stratosphere, before it slams into him and began to push him higher and higher, until he was out of sight and most likely consumed by it. Soon his ki had indeed disappeared, and Goku saw it from the emotional roller coaster they had been, as Goten rushes forward to help Krillin up to his feet, and Goku tries to do the same for Vegeta, though he rejects this. The four Saiyans float together and look towards space, knowing the day had indeed been won, as Whis and Beerus fly over. The group, including Beerus and Whis, would all gather somewhere where the Dragon Balls could be used. Remember, Piccolo has been wished back to life using Dende's set of Dragon Balls, so Shenron cannot revive him, but Namek could be contacted by King Kai to make a wish, or at the most extreme, Bulma could bribe Whis to bring him back to life. This isn't a skill of his that she knows about, but he could mention it in return for food. Gohan, however, will return to life in a much different state than what he had died in. His death here is much different than what is canon. In this timeline, Gohan technically had everything he needed to destroy Frieza from the beginning. If he had been able to assume God form from the start, he could have wiped out the entire Frieza force single-handedly. As strong as he was, there was no way that first form Frieza could have taken on a Super Saiyan God. But he had been complacent, and had lost his already somewhat meager control over his God Ki. Remember, in this timeline, Gohan has now had 2 moments as a grown man with someone to protect where his short-sightedness had nearly cost them everything. He was all but aware that if his father and the others had been a few minutes late, Frieza would have likely destroyed the planet and kept moving. No more. From now on, he needed to rely on his own power, not solely his father's. Not just this, but his dad had spent his entire life protecting the planet. At some point, he would have to take that mantle up and protect his own family. And of course, Tien had been in a very similar mindset for a long time now. But this latest battle had only deepened his convictions, and may cause even deeper regret at his decision to return to his human body. But his warrior's pride didn't allow him to dwell on that despair for long. He had to keep moving forward and work even harder. He'd do it with his own power as well. As this was the mindset of 2 of the warriors involved, and Frieza's defeat coming the way it did, the revivals weren't very joyous, so the majority of everyone involved was pretty somber save for Beerus and Whis, who took the opportunity to enjoy some of the Earth's food. As for Tien's students, they thank him for reviving them, but unless it's another emergency, they're never doing this again. Also a quick note, but the wish to revive everyone had to be worded as revive those killed in battle today, and not just those killed by Frieza's men, as Gohan was technically killed by Tien's Kaioki Koho. With everything set back into working order, Goku, Vegeta, Yamcha, and Krillin spent a few days on Earth just because. For Yamcha, he'd already been away from his newborn for far too long, but I believe Pizza would admonish that she could accept his reasons for being gone so long, even though she by no means liked them. At least she knew her children's father could protect them. Unbeknown to the couple, their firstborn, Kurizu, had heard this statement, and it actually made her feel a bit regretful herself at not doing much training as her father did. Perhaps she had, her crush Goten would have been so hurt during the battle as well. Or she could have completed the silly dance that Buri wanted to do to help everyone. After this short break for family time and recuperation, the Saiyans all return to Beerus' planet to continue their training under Whis. While back on Earth, Gohan takes a step forward. He seeks out Tien at his home of the city and asks him if he would like to join he and Piccolo in the Room of Spirit and Time soon. While Gohan is now more willing to train than ever, you also have to account for all the Saiyans being gone right now. If something else were to happen and he were to be with them, then the Earth would be left even more defenseless. Beyond that, taking one day off from work was much easier than taking a few months or weeks off. Also, since the Namekians had no need for food and only required water, they could bypass the 2-man food limit. Beyond that, Tien wasn't a Saiyan, so his appetite wasn't even a large issue here, meaning they'd have more than enough provisions. With a chance to train with the god for over a year offered, the 3 embark out to the lookout, hoping to conquer their own weaknesses. Meanwhile, in space, ever so slowly, a body drifts. The remains of the torso of Frieza, burnt and beaten, had not been fully consumed by Goten and Goku's blast. Like in the Saiyan saga with Vegeta, the beam, though more powerful than their victim, was not maintained long enough for it to incinerate Frieza, but instead push him out into deep space. As he'd already been heavily injured, the blast had been enough to push him to the very brink of death and far out away from Earth, where his now measly ki signature could no longer be felt by those on the planet. But Frieza was not dead. In fact, the blast that hit him had inadvertently cauterized his severed torso, stopping his bleeding and giving him time to recover and brood as he drifted in the cold void of space. Krillin's snide remarks had imparted the wisdom of ki efficiency on him, an issue he'd had even on Namek, and now was his downfall once again. He'd allowed a lowly Saiyan he'd once easily destroyed to prove himself his superior, and it only fueled his deep-seated hatred more and more. Slowly, his torso began to move quicker and quicker, until the speed was definitely caused by flight, and he was sent zooming off deeper into the galaxy to find the Frieza Force. He was now somewhat irritated that he hadn't warned his men to step back or anything before his transformation to wipe them all out. It was simply another grain of salt in his stinging wounds that would impart the lesson of big picture thinking on him. Back on Beerus' planet, as in canon, Beerus' brother, the god of destruction of Universe 6, and his attendant Vados would arrive for food challenges. Earth is discovered and Champa's petty jealousy sets in motion a cross-universal tournament for the planet. But this doesn't bear an extreme amount of mentioning, as the tournament here is truly a pretty easily settled aspect of this timeline. And unlike what happened with the battle against Frieza between this part and last, this will not change. Think about it. Universe 7 currently has 4 Super Saiyan Blues and a Super Saiyan God, who are all training. There was no shortage of strong warriors to participate, and when they do, Universe 6 will not be prepared. But the major change here would be the exclusion of Monaka. I don't think Whis would be fond of the idea of tricking the Saiyans. Remember, he had already gotten a great deal of motivation out of them by stating that Krillin was the closest to mastering the technique he meant to teach them than any of the 4 Saiyans. Any more inadequacy could lead to Monaka being challenged by one of them, and if so, he'd be revealed as a fraud, calling Beerus and Whis' credibility into question. Whis would rather avoid angering their current sources of entertainment and cuisine for something so unnecessary. It is of course arguable that Beerus could overrule this, or that Whis wouldn't care, but I find both pretty unlikely. As such, the Saiyan gods are set to participate in the tournament with the domain of the final choice being given to them. Vegeta would make a strong argument for Tien, but Gohan was definitely stronger, especially after training and gaining control over his god state. He would also be interested in testing himself after all the training he'd done, and so he is chosen. Tien decides to remain on Earth for the sake of using the Room of Spirit and Time once again, with Piccolo agreeing to stay back and train with him. With the fighting order of Gohan, Yamcha, Goku, Krillin, and Vegeta, Universe 6 is defeated, with Cabba and Hit presenting the only real challenges, and Gohan decimating his first 3 opponents with very little theatrics, actually taking out a large amount of pent-up aggression on Frost and never giving him a good chance to actually cheat. I even imagine him offering to show Cabba the Super Saiyan transformation after the tournament, meaning he and Cabba form that bond of teacher and student instead of Vegeta and Cabba. And I believe Gohan's analytical mind would allow a slight predictive edge against Hit, but I do not believe he has the power to overcome him yet. But Yamcha does, especially after seeing Gohan fight and using his Super Saiyan Blue form. The ending of this saga would also be the same as in canon, with the arrival of Zeno and the idea of the Tournament of Power being planted in his mind. Back in space, Frieza would have finally found the remainder of his army, actually running into Berry Blue and Kikuno, the crew he has in the new Broly movie, just extremely early here. Seeing his body in such bad shape, he is instantly rushed into a regeneration chamber, but he stops Kikuno and orders him to only regenerate his legs. When asked why, Frieza declares he wants to keep the scar from Vegeta's attack, as a reminder to never again be complacent. It would serve as a wonderful motivation for his training, and so his legs and tail regenerated, while his arms were replaced with a mechanical one. He keeps his scar, and after this, he would seclude himself and begin training to once again take revenge at a later date. But this, Pull Soldier fam, is what we'll be leaving our story off for right now. Hey guys, vid's already super long and I don't want to drag it out much more, so we're going to be quick. Shout out to What If Universe for once again being the editor of this video for me. It's a big help in my schedule being so cluttered this year. Shout out to @Cobb's Art or Kobe Faizan for his amazing commissions that you've seen throughout the video. He made Krillin and Yamcha look really good, and he also made the thumbnail. And shout out to Alex Nagadao for brainstorming with me. Be sure to follow him on Twitch, where you can actually hang out with me in a ton of his streams. You can find all these guys' links in the description below. You know the drill by now. Like the video if you want more, don't be silent, comment your thoughts, please share with a friend, and on social media it does a lot to help the channel out. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, join the Discord, and last but certainly not least, our mighty amazing patrons. In the hero tier, Lone Quaid, Zara Returns, Treb, and Stefan Conchfort, as well as Lee Ferguson. In Beyond tier, Knuckles OX, Don, and Robert Smith. And in Plus Ultra tier, DJ the Lazy Gamer. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. You guys have no idea how far your support actually goes. And I had to start doing this, but shout out to the members of the channel. I'm going to start putting you guys at the beginning of videos and saying that these videos are sponsored by you guys, because truly they are, just like the patrons sponsor you guys. But I might change a good bit of the structure up. I'm just not sure how I'll do it just yet. But for now, we've got to go. As always, take care of yourselves and go beyond plus ultra. See you guys next time.